and welcome to the latest episode of our Thriving Tribe, the Zoom Room sessions. I'm David Francis Moore.
I'm Juliette Harvey.
And today we are joined by Susan Buttner, visual artist. Susan's work has been exhibited both at home and abroad. Her work is held in public collections both at home and abroad. Susan, thank you so much for joining us on the Zoom Rooms today.
My pleasure, David. It's really nice to see you again. And hi, Juliette, it's nice to meet you.
Hi.
Very happy to take part in this conversation.
Brilliant.
It should be interesting. An urge to engage in nature and people and objects. It's always been something that I was interested in. I would have donkeys years ago lived by the beach in Balbriggan when it was a very small village. So we would have had a lot of animals falling off cliffs. We were always bringing home rabbits and birds and stuff. And it was, mix that with cycling through long grass and getting spiders' webs in your face and that terror that moment. So I was always very sensitive to things around me, and that would have translated into paintings and drawings and plasticine and bits of stick, and it's always been there. So yeah, it's always been part of what I did. I also used it as a way of escaping from a big family scene, loud, noisy family. So I would use it as a way to retreat into a small space, just to be by myself. So I think that's really where it manifests from. Gosh, it's interesting because to me, art is the everyday. A lot of the objects I use to bring together to try and explore them in different narratives are of the everyday. Link that into the sort of projects I don't necessarily go out of my way to seek, but they fall into my lap. But I think there's a subconscious going on there where I'm looking out for these opportunities to engage. I love being an artist. It's what I do. It's how I see the world, and it's how I communicate the worlds that I'm in. And actually a lot of those would resonate, but I think you can probably take that list and you can apply it to most professions. I think what's unique about being an artist, maybe not unique, that's the wrong word to use, but we're used to risk, we're used to struggle, we're used to financial, being on the fringe and the periphery, if you like. So we've had to be adaptable, we've had to seek out opportunities, we have to be aware of funding. It's very competitive, but it needs to be competitive because you have to find your voice within the group of artists that you work with. So I think all of these things are, they go up and down. There's strengths and weaknesses within each artist in relation to all of those subheadings that you mentioned, but they're a necessary skill set in order to try and take your practice. Like, I'm quite possessive of my stuff. I collect so much stuff. This is a temporary studio and I've just taken over a room, removed the bed, put my shit up, as my kids tend to call it. And so I'm actively trying to find a way to find that energy to not block out what's happening outside, because that is feeding into your practice. We're used to isolation as artists, but all of these things that are just slithering away on the edges, they feed in, and they need to feed in because we're part of what's going on outside, even though we tend to rather selfishly cut ourselves off from it from time to time. So yeah, take your work, stand behind it, find a place for your work out there, and be capable to recognize your strengths and weaknesses and be aware of them. Write them down, work on them, and don't be afraid to engage. One of the hardest things to do as an artist is to engage. You need to engage with other people, other artists. You think of the work we do with videographers, sound people, people writing music for us, engaging with dancers, performers. There's a whole plethora of people that we connect with. But it's really important that it's not just those people, that we're not cut off from communities, societies, corporations. All of these things feed into our practice. You just need to be aware of them. So I was in school and I had imagined my life as a very successful artist, as you do. And we were in the Highlanes art gallery and I was speaking to the invigilator, and I'd never even heard of invigilation before. This is an alien word to me. And I said, you better have a big room because I'm going to have my stuff in here. But I think the arrogance of youth is wonderful. I love it. And then, you know, subsequently, I always just wanted to make. I can make stuff out of nothing, something out of nothing. And to me, that's a language. And it can be connected to research, but they happen in moments on their own. So I like to try and create that space where there's, to me, this is bodily. Everything I do in here is bodily. What did I want as an artist? Just to have a voice, to contribute towards a conversation. And if anything else, just to open up conversations. Simple as that. I don't want to set the world on fire. Probably too late anyway. And I don't seek any sort of huge recognition, fame or fortune. That's left behind when you're 17. But I do feel I have a voice and I have a personal perspective and an opinion on things. And I like to connect with other people and just get that conversation out there. Which is really important to me. It's an instigator. And it's quite interesting because when I see words, I tend to visualize things. So I would do a certain amount of reading and writing, and actually, funny enough, a lot of the thinking and the visualization of things that are a response to words, they're in your head. You're not necessarily always working in the studio. You're constantly working outside on the street, in the park, at the beach, in the supermarket, wherever, but I'm feeding into news and articles that I'm influenced by or not influenced by. So language is hugely important to me, actually. I think probably as an artist, particularly if you've come back to art late, if you have restudied, if you have expanded your practice by doing a master's, those connections you make are so important. You need, as an artist, to be aware of what particular galleries are showing work that might be similar to yours, that might be interested in yours. You have to find your place. I think it's really difficult. Gosh, I don't know how we ever survive. It's really interesting because they're very different spaces. To experience sculpture or paintings or any sort of artistic works online, to me, tends to be quite flat. The pixels are different. The feeling can move in and out, but I don't get a bodily feel unless that is mixed with really clever sound. It's interesting. That can engage the body and the mind and give you a more sensory, emotional feeling to stuff. So if you have a live performance, magic. You're of the moment. You're experiencing it bodily because you're rooted watching this performance or you're taking part in it. That to me activates sculpture, activates painting. It isn't always necessary because those sculptures and those paintings need to work and do their own thing. But when you get a bodily response to them up front, to me, that's just magic. And I think in sort of from a digital perspective, it's terribly exciting. It's exciting because it's what younger people know. It's what's become our way of living. We're in our studios, we're posting online. The response to our work is different, but it seems to fit in and it seems to work, and it can work if you work it. But it takes a lot of work, you know? I think probably most artists need to have entrepreneurial skills. You need to be able to expand yourself past your studio. As I said previously, you need to be able to engage. I remember once doing a project where I needed 2 basketballs, what do you call them, basketball hoop things, really tall ones. We were doing a live performance and I didn't have any money to buy them. So I went into Smith's and I said, I'm taking part in a collaborative art practice. Can we borrow 2 basketball thingies? Didn't even have the right language for it, and they gave them to us and we cleaned them and we gave them back. So to me, that's a very small example of mixing with a sort of a corporate sort of identity, someone like Smith's, but they were willing to do it. The point is that as artists, if you don't have the money, if you don't have the funding, how are you going to get the work made? So we're quite used to having to think on our feet. It's a really good skill, and it's a necessary skill. Don't be afraid to ask. You'd be amazed how many people are open to the suggestion of working with artists, particularly when they know it's going to have a collaborative, open conversation approach. But it's still not easy. You know, there's a lot of competition for those basketballs. But, you know, Smiths were great. I mean, the thing is, I think Ireland has been maybe a little bit slower than other countries of tapping into that corporate sponsorship. It's almost, it's not that it's considered a dirty word, it's that you have to be ethical in your choices of who you're partnering with, and you need to be aware of that as an artist. And so you need to be comfortable with the company that you're approaching to see whether they could give you funding or not. So there's a lot of ethical and moral considerations to take into consideration as an artist, as if we don't have enough to do already. But it's important because, I mean, there's plurality in our work, of course there is. Funding is very difficult. Don't rely on funding in order to get your work made. Find another way to make your work. And that's, as you know yourself, as artists, that's what we're good at doing. And definitely that's an entrepreneurial skill, because you've got to keep pushing yourself. You've got to keep making the contacts. There are very few people knocking on the door to say, you know, hey, Susan, will you make me an insect head? But it doesn't stop me doing it, and it doesn't stop me seeing the potential in it. And who knows where that insect head is going to, you know, end up? I don't really know. It doesn't really matter. Art for art's sake. I don't know. I take risks with my work. I'm not afraid to fail, which is interesting. I think well, God, can you say your own work is good? Yeah, hey, I think my work is good. You know, does it fit in? No, probably not. Does it need to fit in? I don't think so, because it is who I am, and it's what I do. And I don't overthink it, but I do want people to know about it. It's really interesting, isn't it? So there's that tension, there's that retraction, and that urge to engage, because this is what we do. Communication skills are essential. I think to be able to connect with people, if that's what your thing is really important. And I think you have to be imaginative. You know, and for Christ's sake, you know, try something different. Don't play it safe. Although it's interesting actually, because for me, when I get too much crap in my head, I tend to retract a little bit, particularly if I've been researching, and I'll go down to a very low-key, minimalist, almost sulky sort of format of producing work, and it's sort of like a respite away from the manicness of bringing stuff together. And I also recognize in artists, in most creative practices, we have highs and lows, and we have to be aware of our mood swings, and we have to find distractions. Art is wonderful, but it's not the whole of our lives. You know, we've got kids, we've got jobs that we try to keep going, and thank God we have gardens to distract us. So you've got to be aware of all these balls and hold them up in the air and juggle them as you go along, but always remember to grab one of those balls and just stop talking bullshit and relax and stop thinking. You know, but don't ever lose touch, because you need to be in touch. You know, you need to know the galleries. You need to know who's in your arts council. Fingal are wonderful. You need to be aware of who, it's not a nice term, but who are the gatekeepers? You need to find out this whole grouping of people around you that can help and support. But just be aware that there's a long queue. There's a lot of good artists, and there's a small amount of funding. And if you need to use those entrepreneurial skills and find another way to get that work made, that sounds like a lot of advice. 2 kids, 2 fabulous brats. And so that keeps me busy. You know, God, I got really ruthless when I first had my kids. I would drop them to crash or drop them to Gaelscoil, and I would come straight in and I would do no fucking housework, and I would go straight up to my studio. So I gave myself 4 or 5 hours a day to do my stuff and just release and play and see what happens. And then I would cut off, quite strictly cut off, pick up the kids and become a mom again. So I learned to structure my time. I'm quite good to myself. I give my time as an artist because ultimately that's what I am. And yes, I am a mother and a wife and all of these things. And I have parents who are, you know, older now, and we have all this COVID thing to worry about. It's just been phenomenal change in how we behave. Stephen went to the supermarket this morning with his mask on and his gloves, and I'm thinking, Jesus, you know? So there's an awful lot of things that we have to take into consideration, and you need to try and protect yourself to a certain extent. Remember, you're an artist first and foremost, and find the time within your busy family and your working life to make this work, because a lot of the time this is, for some people, an afterthought. They're busy working to pay the bills, and they don't have time to make the art, and you've got to try and find the time. Juggling mom, job, art, Christ, you know. Find time to go to openings in galleries, get out there, see who's making work. There's nothing more exciting than seeing other people's work, and whether that be film or photography or painting or sculpture or performance, there's a huge amount out there on our doorsteps that we can engage in, but you've got to make the time. And a lot of the time these openings are at tea time, when you might be picking up your kids or you might be making dinner. So as a woman, I always consider my practice from a female point of view. A lot of my figurative bodily things are in fact women in our the structures and the systems that we engage in and work our way through. So there's always that aspect of finding time as a woman, making art that reflects on not just women, but on men and everybody else. But my God, it's complicated. It's extremely complicated. But hey, it's what I do. Not. I don't think thrive as an artist is a word that would ever come into my mind. Art has always been a struggle to make it, a struggle to fund it, a struggle to get it out there, a struggle to find a way of connecting. But you know, as you say, it goes back to what we do. It's how we see the world. It's what we do. It's our jobs. It's our profession. I think the art colleges, and this is only my personal perspective, they do bring the Arts Council in. They do bring in curators and gallerists, and they do as much as they can to expose the students to what lies outside of the college gates, the real world. But in real terms, until you're actually out there, until you're actually filling in those applications, which can be, some of them are easier than others. Fingal's is great. Some of the Arts Council ones, oh my God, sometimes when you're filling out those forms and you've uploaded all your images and you press that return button, you feel like you've jogged a fucking marathon. It is complex and it is a skill, but it's a skill that you need to learn how to do. So you can get all the advice you want in college, but once you get out into the real world, I say rejection is not a bad thing. Ask the question, why did I get rejected? Try and figure out another way to come at it, but be true to your practice and true to yourself, and don't fall into the trap of using language or making work that you think they'll want. Just be true to yourself. But absolutely, could the colleges and the institutions do more? They can always do more. More is a good thing. On the top priority of the wish list would be to be able to get a mortgage, a subsidised, affordable mortgage that allowed me to take on a building with a group of other artists. So you had a permanence. A space where there's no fear of losing your studio or the landlord increasing rents. But I do think that part of being an artist, you've got to figure out a way of raising some sort of an income to sustain that space. And that in itself brings out your entrepreneurial skills. Well, how do we do this? You know, it's difficult to maintain a practice where you also teach, whether that be painting or ceramics or sculpture or whatever. But it's a necessary skill sometimes in order to survive as an artist. You've got to think of the finance of the monthly, the weekly, the daily costs. That's got to be part of your whole approach to what you're doing. But absolutely, if you had permanent, mortgageable properties that become investments for that group of art, that they can open the doors, make art, invite people in, open up conversations, but have some sort of permanence. It's a big ask, or is it?
Susan, thank you so much for joining us on the Zoom room sessions today. If people want to find out more information about your work, what's your website, what's your social media handles?
So it's www.susanbuttner.com. I'm pretty active on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. And I do hope that you'll try and come and see us in the Drogheda when we finally get back up and running. It's going to be a group show. There's a live performance. It'll be wonderful. Fingers crossed. And David, it's lovely to see you again. And Julia, very nice to meet and talk to you. Thank you guys.
Brilliant. Thanks, Susan.